And now, let me introduce our distinguished guest and honorary degree recipient. Our speaker this morning, Dr. Edward Ayers, is a great scholar, a great citizen leader and leader in higher education, and a great teacher. And I suspect it is that final accolade which brings him the greatest pride. He stands in the very front ranks of American historians with more than 10 books on his vita on the Civil War and the American South, which have earned him the field's very highest awards, among them the Bancroft Prize and Beveridge Prizes for distinguished writing in American history, and at a 2012 White House ceremony, the National Humanities Medal. A graduate of the University of Tennessee with a doctorate from Yale, Ed is revered for the breadth and imagination of his scholarship, for the colorful variety of sources where he finds insight about the past, for the strength and clarity of his writing, and perhaps above all, for the empathy with which he treats his subjects. To read Ed's work is to appreciate the countless hours he has spent in fundamental research, in its archival and human nitty-gritty. The result is a portrait of the South that is honest and fair, but above all, deeply human. Alive to the South's full complexity, its great tragedies and injustices, from poverty to civil rights, which we must never forget, but also its extraordinary strengths: literature, music, the bonds of faith and family, which we should always cherish. And at the height of his scholarly career, Ed had an opportunity, I hope many of you will have someday, seniors, to take the mantle of leadership. First as dean at UVA, and then from 2007 to 2015 as president of the University of Richmond. He is a visionary university leader, one of the most acclaimed in America, and he drove U of R's continued descent to national prominence, overseeing a strategic plan with remarkable impact in areas as diverse as the curriculum, facilities, and student life. In the relative elysium of the post-presidency, Ed has returned to his roots as a scholar and a teacher. The classroom is sacred space for him. He shines as a teacher, challenging, funny, inspiring. He was here on Longwood's campus in early October, speaking to the hundreds of school children we had on campus to learn about civics during the days before the vice presidential debate. In 2003, the Carnegie Foundation chose him as National Professor of the Year. These days, technology is helping spread Ed's teaching talents more and more widely, from an array of successful websites and digital learning projects that have attracted millions of users to his nationally syndicated radio show and podcast, Backstory with the American History Guys. Seniors, today you set out on a life and career into a world of great opportunity, but also real anxiety and tumult. In such a setting, I can think of no one better to offer your final lesson as a Longwood undergraduate, a historian who has immersed himself in the most deeply challenging experiences we have faced as a nation and discovered in them the genuine humanity and courage that got us through, a leader who has thought deeply about why higher education matters, how the liberal arts and sciences can enrich your life and spirit, and above all, a great and revered teacher. And before we begin the final lesson for the class of 2017, first, it is a privilege to initiate Dr. Ayers into our ranks with an honorary degree. Ed, will you please come meet me here at the podium with the rector, and I will intone some magical words. On behalf of the Board of Visitors and the faculty, staff, and students of Longwood University, it is my great pleasure to bestow upon you the title Honorary Doctor of Humane Letters, and I will now read the official resolution.
Thank you.
Edward Lynn Ayers, whose contributions to American history and higher education have deeply enriched our understanding of the past and the lives of countless students, is conferred the honorary degree of Doctor of Humane Letters, and is, by the authority vested in the Board of Visitors and on behalf of the faculty, hereby awarded that degree with all the rights, privileges, and responsibilities thereto appertaining, given at Longwood University in Virginia, this 20th day of May, 2017, in the 178th year of the university. Congratulations. Dr. Ayers.
Thank you so much. It's great to see everybody this morning. Thank you so much for this wonderful honor. And the 2-hour speech that I have really should just fly by because of the cooling breeze and the nice conditions here. I'm so honored to have a chance to be with you. And I think we'd all have to agree that we're living in unusual times. Generally, no matter who you are and what you believe in, the 21st century so far has been a surprise. No one seems able to predict anything. Polls proved wrong time after time about the presidential election, and no one told us about the largest financial meltdown of the last 70 years was coming twice, or about Brexit or whatever today's headlines are. The news changes with every hour, every update on your phone. Not that you will look at it for the next 12 minutes, please. But what you'd have to wonder, have things ever been this uncertain, this scary, this unpredictable? Has any generation ever come into the world with so much up in the air? Well, yeah, actually. In fact, right here in your own town, people have seen far greater uncertainty than we confront today. The vast war that redefined this nation ended only 30 minutes from here, after all, and that war redefined world history, bringing an immediate end to the largest and most powerful system of slavery in the modern world. The United States has never seen a bigger transformation than that, with more profound consequences, and we're at the epicenter of it right now. Need to remember, before 1861, 4 million people lived in perpetual bondage. In less time than you've been at Longwood, they had helped make themselves free and fought to save the United States. Over the next few years, those formerly enslaved people became citizens, and the men among them became voters. The 14th Amendment declared that if you were born in this country, you are an American citizen with all the rights that citizenship brings. There has never been a bigger change in our fundamental law. But here's the thing, no one foresaw that seismic event before it happened. In Virginia, the largest slave state in 1860, a convention in Richmond voted over and over again to stay in the United States. They said, we helped create this nation not that long ago, why would we leave? And yet, that convention then changed its mind, and Virginia descended into a war that destroyed Virginia more than any other place in the United States. The area where you have lived for 4 years has seen history that dwarfs anything in our present day. Now, there are many things that we can learn from those years, but this is what I want to emphasize today. History never moves in a straight line, and history never stops. Headlines, by definition, are meant to be replaced by something else that seems really important for a day or two. It's often the things farther down the screen that ultimately shape our lives the most. The news and the business or lifestyle sections, for example, push and pull on our lives in ways you cannot see until you look for a job or get ready to start a family or try to buy a house or decide where to live. Fashion, sport, humor, films all end up shaping the texture and meaning of our lives. Now, growing up, like most of us, I lived on the very surface of the bubble of time. My imagination could barely reach beyond my own experience, before my own time, any farther than my own eyes could see. But as children, a few times we were told that we were living in history. When John Glenn went into space, we listened over the PA system and felt ourselves part of something larger than ourselves. When President Kennedy was killed 1,000 miles away, we felt history wash over us with a strange, deep sadness for a man we knew only from images on black and white televisions. These were events, moments, sharp memories shared with millions of people. But sometimes history snuck up on us when we weren't watching for it. A few minutes on those same black and white TVs in February 1964 only months after we had watched the long scenes of President Kennedy's funeral, we saw the Beatles for the first time. And for people my age, nothing in music can ever be as exciting again as the following decade, which is why we clog up your radios with classic rock stations. And on behalf of my generation, I would like to apologize that you can still just hear Leonard Skinner anytime that you want to. But we'll be out of the way soon, and so will conventional radio. Thank you. We're out of the way of our generation. But on the other hand, here on the 50th anniversary of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, there's now a satellite radio station debuted yesterday that plays nothing but the Beatles all the time. So we're not quite gone yet. Now, if we had more time, I could extend the list of the great surprises in American history: the Great Depression, World War II, the Cold War, the end of the Cold War. But let's see if you can identify this period. Here's the scene. Unemployment is higher than at any time since the 1930s. Inflation is out of control. The stock market tanks. People we don't know anything about are rioting against us on television. Political scandal has rocked the nation for years, and people wonder if we will ever recover. Now, here's the giveaway for people of a certain age. The price of gasoline has skyrocketed, and people have to wait in line to get any gas at all. Yes, I'm talking about the golden age of 1974. That was the year that I graduated from college and got married. And this is something our own kids find incomprehensible. You got married when you were 21 years old and didn't have a job and had no idea what you were going to do? Yes, honey. Don't do that. But we did. And 43 years later, we're still married, so that worked out. And we looked around and we decided, well, things have probably never been worse than this, so let's get hitched. And here's an idea. Let's go to Johnson City, Tennessee, and I have a brand new degree in American Studies, and let's see what job I can find. And I started in a box factory, and I wasn't very good at that, so then I went to the repo department of a tire and appliance store, and then I got lucky and got a chance to run a youth center where my job was to supply food and jobs for young people who dropped out of high school. But I didn't worry too much because I had already decided, after looking around, that I would spend the rest of what promised to be the equally crummy 1970s in the graduate school, as far back into the library as I could get. And when I told my mom, a fifth grade teacher, that I was going to become a historian, she said, with the kind of encouragement that you'd hope that you'd get from your parents, "Well, what for, honey? We already know what happened." Which is kind of a good point, but nevertheless, I still went back in the library. 5 years later, I emerged, rubbed my eyes, and found the worst academic job market in history. There was exactly one job in the country in my field. So when I looked out and got a job in Charlottesville, the country promptly entered another recession, and they cut the budget at my new university. By this time, we'd shown the same instinct for planning that we'd always shown and had a baby, and decided to have a house because it was such a great time to buy a house. Interest rates were only 18%. Later, I became dean, and the economy promptly entered the worst financial crisis in decades, and then I became president, and another financial crisis hit 6 months later. So I would say, basically, don't give me a job. I don't think I can inflict too much damage in the short time that I'm with you today. So what you see is my own navigation of history has been impeccable. I've been able to predict all the currents and ride them with expertise. And yet, I get to stand in front of you today here in this fully ventilated and comfortable robe. So you should take encouragement from that. Apparently, they don't hold these stupid decisions against you for the rest of your life, because everyone lives in history. We have no choice. History is the very air we breathe. History is everywhere all the time. You, as you, are largely your own history, woven into the history of the time and space you share with the people with whom you sit. There's a reason that you are the class of 2017, that we put a date on your graduation, because that date will define you for the rest of your lives in ways that you cannot tell right now. Even as you're sitting there, history is pulling and tugging on you in ways that is going to shape your life. Now, the fact is that we always live in unusual times, and you might as well get used to it. Some years are better than others financially or politically, but things are always moving in ways that we cannot and can see sometimes. The only law of history I've been able to discover after 4 decades of studying it is that the unexpected, good and bad, always happens. Here's the thing. Even though we are destined to live in history, that doesn't mean that we have to take the history that's handed to us. If we realize that we're living in history, we can better navigate it. We can shape it to our purposes, whether in our private lives, in our communities, in our work, our political choices. So rather than taking what history hands you as a done deal, realize that the very volatility, the unpredictability of history means that it can be moved, and often suddenly in ways better than seemed possible. And you have stirring examples of that all around you as well. Barbara Johns, 16 years old, decided to walk out of her tarpaper school in Farmville in 1951. Nothing in Barbara Johns' experience could have led her to believe that such a bold step would change anything. Racial segregation seems so woven into the very fabric of life in Virginia and in the South that it can never change. When I was watching John Glenn orbit the earth, and when I was watching President Kennedy be assassinated, I lived in the segregated South. I learned to recognize W and C as one of the first things I learned. That gives you an idea of how history can change, and it's changed because people like Barbara Johns didn't recognize that history just seems too heavy to move. She did move it, slowly at first, and then with increasing speed. And the very intransigence of those opposed to change helped speed the change. As massive resistance shut in here and in other cities across Virginia, shutting down schools, massive determination arose to defeat it. The edifice of racial segregation, so powerful and omnipresent, collapsed with startling speed, just as slavery had a century before. Now, we all know there is still enormous work to be done, that the past still has its weight, still presents its burden. But the story of Farmville reminds us that things can change. In your own time at Longwood, you have seen that as well. The eyes of the nation were upon you as you hosted the vice presidential debate last year, and you hosted it with such spirit and class. I was jealous. You did such a great job with it. I did come here and meet these school kids who are seizing this moment that they will never forget the rest of their lives to participate in this historic event. President Reevely and all of you mobilized yourselves to help make your own history. In fact, you have learned things at Longwood that allow you to understand what all this swirl going on around you might mean. You first learned how to deal with complexity in all its forms. You know that the answers are almost never black and white, on, off, us or them. You've learned how to deal with ambiguity when justice and wisdom are not clearly labeled. You've learned how to deal with people, beliefs, and accents that are different from your own, understanding that all people are as fully human, as fully complex, as full of surprise as you are. And finally, you have learned that the world is full of possibility, that what will be is not merely more of what has been, that great leaps are possible, that the future can be better than the past, that the world responds to effort and goodwill and knowledge. You've been fortunate to be at this place, dedicated to fostering those traits. Congratulations to you as you go out to make your own history.